Haunted by Alan Keene. Narrated by Tom Fria. 1. Will Turley took the helm of his boat, a 25-foot offshore, and navigated a rare patch of sea fog, which had descended across the ocean ahead. The small fishing boats sliced through the rough rolling waves with their gray swell. The swell was to be expected at this season on the west coast. It was cold, murky, and with the darkness that mirrored the approaching nightfall. October was often known as the wet season to the local fishing town of Port Sandown, Oregon, and was a prelude to the looming winter, the harshest and most inhospitable season that this small fishing community would have to endure. Fall had always been a time when all felt pessimistic about the coming months, and moods darkened to accompany the dark weather surrounding them. The boat braved the freezing waters as it left the port on its way to the small island of Mysteria, which was visible from the harbor. This was his last job of the day, having agreed to transfer a passenger from the port on the mainland to the small harbor on the southeast coast of the island. Cameron Drake stood rigid beside the sailor he'd hired to ferry him to the island, where he'd bought a home, without having seen it. Hoped he wouldn't disgrace himself by throwing up. Grasping the rails bolted to the side of the bulkhead, he rolled with the waves, his knuckles white. The boat's skipper wore a thick turtleneck sweater and blue watch cap. His face, which had on it an expression of amusement, looked like it hadn't seen a razor for at least a week. "What takes a rich and famous writer from England to a little island off the coast of Oregon?" he asked as the sea crashed around them, its spray lurching as high as the windshield. Wipers removed the rogue droplets that remained there. "Thought it was a good idea at the time," Cameron replied in his distinctive English accent. He hoped the despair he felt trying to cope with the rolling sea would be short-lived. He closed his eyes, squeezed them tightly, and puffed his cheeks. Will laughed. "Take it you haven't traveled by sea much before." Cameron kept his eyes closed and shook his head. "Absolutely not," he began. He was struggling with his speech the way one does before the gut surrenders and violently spews out its contents. "The flight here was bad enough. Doesn't seem to make sense for someone who can't travel by sea to live on an island. I thought that one trip was all I'd have to make, unless, of course, I need hospital treatment or something. But I didn't let that cloud my thinking when I decided to move here. I have to ask, but it seems strange that someone from halfway across the world would choose to move so far from his homeland, especially England. Trust me, sir, England wasn't the place for me anymore. Where I lived, gangs of kids in hoodies terrorized the streets. I paid excessive amounts of tax to our government and never saw what it was being used for. It's such an expensive place to live, and if you move out to the countryside, which, okay, isn't that bad, you're still paying excessive rates for the privilege of doing so. I wouldn't have thought that would affect a celebrity such as yourself." "I'm not a celebrity," Cameron began. "I'm a writer. Just because I've appeared on a few shows to plug my book doesn't mean I'm blessed to red carpet treatment and free meals whenever I hit the town." "But if you're a writer, I'd have thought you'd be full of the old green by now. I mean, I've heard of your books before, and out here we're in the middle of nowhere." Cameron took a deep breath. His stomach was churning with the movement of the waves. "It's not easy, believe me. It took me years to build up a fan base. When I started out, the publisher published the book. I marketed it myself. No one these days is willing to give new authors a chance, unless there's money tattooed across the manuscript. There isn't a huge amount of money involved."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?